To a new video and another day of bookmas. So today we're going to be going through 24 books that I loved in 2024. Now this is quite difficult because I feel like this year I found a lot of books that I've really liked, but I wouldn't say loved, but these are the ones that stuck out to me the most when I went back through my Goodreads. I'm just going to dive straight in because I feel like it's going to take me a while to go through each one. I'm just going to do a bit of a run through, a little bit of what they're about. I'm not going to do ratings because obviously you know that I've liked this book considering it's in this video. But yeah, let me know whether any of these have been on your love for this year or any year in general. Comment down below or let me know what books you loved in 2024. Let's just dive straight into today's video and go through the 24 books that I loved in 2024. So the first book we have is Checkmate by Ali Hazelwood, and this is one of the first books that I've read this year. I've tried to keep them in order of the ones that I've read, so we're going to see how my reading style has changed throughout the year. But this is a YA romance from Ali Hazelwood, and it's her first YA romance, which I was actually very impressed with considering this is not her usual style of writing. So it follows our main character Mallory, who has swore off playing chess, but when an opportunity arises that Mallory can't pass up, she ends up back in the chess world playing against the current world champion. We then follow Mallory playing chess and that sort of thing and rising up through the ranks, and there's like a little bit of a romance that blossoms out. It's kind of like a rivals to lovers romance. It's so cute, it's so interesting. There is a lot of chess in here, but to be honest, I didn't mind that. I actually found it really interesting and I was able to follow along with it very, very easily. It wasn't like too complicated or anything like that. Just such a cute read. I just really enjoyed it. Our next book is When in Rome by Sarah Adams, which is the first one in this kind of series. So it's a small town romance following our main character Amelia, who is a pop star. After feeling a little bit overwhelmed with her life, she decides to just run away in the middle of the night, take a leaf out of Audrey Hepburn's book and head to Rome. But with her really busy schedule, she actually can't obviously go to Rome, Italy, so she settles for Rome, Kentucky as the next best thing. On the way there though, her car breaks down, so while her car's being fixed, she stays with Noah, a pie shop owner who lives in the small town, and there obviously a romance kind of blossoms from there. But it's so adorable. If you've watched Hannah Montana the movie, it basically gives the same vibes as that, but just so cozy. Loved the series, loved Sarah Adams' writing, and yeah, I just love the characters in general, and I adore Hannah Montana the movie, so who wouldn't want that in a book? Next book we have is Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home, which is the third installment in the Magnolia Park series. Obviously I can't say too much about the storyline in general due to it being the third installment in the series. We're still following Magnolia and BJ in this one, still learning about their complicated relationship and how they're dealing with certain things, and we get more of an insight into the characters and why they behaved a certain way in the first book, and you kind of just grow to love them even more and learn their backgrounds and that sort of thing, and just get overall like a more insight into who they are as people. Next book we have then follows on from that, and it is Daisy Hates the Great Undoing, which is the fourth installment in the Magnolia Parks universe, but this one is in the same timeline as Magnolia Park's The Long Way Home, but it's from Daisy and Christian and Julian's point of view. Again, I can't say too much about this one with it being so far on in the series, but just love the characters, and Julian Hates honestly broke my heart in this book. I just love him. I just love him so much. The next book is Butcher and Blackbird, which is a serial killer romance following Sloane and Rowan. Now I know you're like, serial killer romance? Who would want to read that? But honestly, so good, so funny. I did not expect it to be this funny. After an unusual meeting, we're going to call it that, they strike up an annual vigilante game where they basically have one person who they have to go and fight each other to kill, basically, like whoever gets there first gets to kill them. Both serial killers only kill bad people. They don't just kill innocent people. So they're basically fighting to kill the bad people. So each year they meet up on a certain day. They're given like a location and the person that they're going to kill. And they basically challenge each other who can get there first. It's so funny. There's so much comedic relief to the whole gruesome serial killer aspect of this book. I just was hooked from the beginning. And then obviously throughout this vigilante game, an unlikely friendship and romance strikes up, which you wouldn't think could happen, but it does, and it is so good. It's just bingeable. I honestly recommend, if you think you're not going to like this, I still recommend giving it a go. Do check trigger warnings because there are obviously some things that I spoke about in here. It is quite graphic, but it's still funny. It's so funny. And the next book is part of a series, and that is The Naturals, but I've gone for picking just this one because kind of the nostalgia of it being the first book in the series just made me love it even more. So this is a YA crime mystery series following a group of individuals called the Naturals, who all have natural abilities to help the FBI solve cases. So some of them can lie detect, some of them can emotion read, some of them are profilers just naturally. All of their abilities have kind of come from the upbringings they've had and how their childhood was and stuff like that. So it's really interesting to learn more about the characters throughout the series. We're following the point of view of Cassie, who's one of the Naturals, but you do learn more about the group as well in terms of, like, again, their upbringings and stuff like that. So you don't kind of miss out on getting more in depth on the other characters just because it's from one point of view. And throughout each book we follow a new case, basically like a Criminal Minds episode. It's just really interesting, such an interesting concept for a book, and I would love for this whole series to be made into like a TV series. I would seriously just eat that up, and it's so interesting and so fast paced. I literally flew through the whole series this year. Then we have what could arguably be my favourite book of the year, and that is A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the second book in the ACOTAR series. It basically follows the events after what's happened in ACOTAR, the first book. The whole of the ACOTAR series is a fantasy series based around our main character Feyre, who's from the mortal world, until one day she accidentally kills a fairy who was disguised as a wolf, and then she has a decision to make. Either they are going to execute her or she has to go and live in the Fey realm. So she opts to go and live there, but then when she gets there she kind of realises that they're having their own complications. There's this blight that's come around and they're trying to fight it off and that sort of thing. So it's really interesting. It just follows that sort of storyline. Obviously I can't say what this exact book is about because of it being a follow-on from the first book, but just so interesting. And the romance in this book was incredible. Just gonna put that out there. If you don't think you like fantasy, honestly give this series a go. It changed my whole world and now I love fantasy. This was honestly like a pivotal moment for my reading journey this year. Then it would not be a book video if I didn't mention my queen Emily Henry and her newest release, Funny Story. Literally, I just love everything Emily Henry puts out. After Daphne's fiance Peter breaks up with her to be with his childhood best friend Petra, Daphne's kind of in a predicament where she's like, oh, what am I gonna do? I don't have anywhere to live now. So it turns out that Petra is Miles's girlfriend. So Miles is also in the same predicament of like, what do you mean you're breaking up with me? So Daphne ends up moving in with Miles, and then the story kind of follows them helping each other get through this breakup and just working on themselves, really, to be honest. That's a lot of this book. It's just kind of self-development and finding out what they want to do now that they're not with their retrospective partners. There's kind of like an element of fake dating in here as well between Miles and Daphne, but it is mainly just focusing on them helping each other, and obviously a friendship forms between them. They kind of got the forced proximity of being roommates, but Emily Henry's stories always read more literary fiction with a hint of romance, which I actually really like, and there's a lot of character development and stuff throughout the story. The next book is Reckless by Elsie Silver, which is the fourth book in the Chestnut Spring series. I literally love this book. I think it's my favourite in the series. I'm literally obsessed with Theo. Like, where do I find a Theo? He's adorable. Now, considering the tropes that are in this book that aren't my favourite, I'm quite shocked that this one was my favourite from the series. I don't want to say too much about it because I feel like people should just go in blind. But yeah, so good, and just all elements of cowboy romance that we need. Then the next book again was such a good fave of mine, and it's fantasy, so I am now just a fantasy girly, and it is Powerless by Lauren Roberts. If you haven't read this book, read it right now. It's a YA fantasy following Payden and Kai. So in the kingdom that they live in, there are ordinaries and elites. So ordinaries don't have powers, elites do. Various different powers throughout the kingdom. Payden is an ordinary disguising as an elite, so she pretends to be psychic to kind of live within the kingdom because ordinaries are banned from the kingdom. They're basically thought to be a plague on the elites. And Kai is the enforcer. He is tasked to get rid of ordinaries. That is literally his job. So yeah, he's literally in charge of like discarding of all ordinaries if they're found. The kingdom then runs like an annual trials where elites go in and they kind of battle each other. Very Hunger Games-esque style trials. So Kai and Payden are both entered into these trials. So she's trying to avoid him. She's like, you know, he's the enforcer. He's going to get rid of me if he finds out I'm an ordinary. They have a pull between each other. The chemistry between them is incredible, and it's just such a good read, and some of the plot twists in here are just crazy. Following on from that, I then read Powerful, which is the novella following Powerless. It's in the same timeline as Powerless, but it's from Adina, who is Payden, obviously our main character in Powerless. It's her best friend. We follow along with Adina, seeing what she's doing while Payden's in the trials, and there's also like a little romance blossoming in this one as well, but it's so sad. If you've read Powerless, reading Powerful from Adina's point of view broke me. I was sobbing. It's only short, but my god, did I like have so many emotions. I honestly, I can't talk about it anymore because I'm gonna cry, because literally it was just so sad. It just broke my heart into a million pieces. Then we have The Housemaid by Freida McFadden, which is a classic Freida McFadden thriller with all the plot twists and everything you need. Following Millie, who's a housemaid, so she moves into this house for a rich family and starts cleaning and cooking and all that sort of stuff there, but she's a live-in housemaid, so she lives obviously within their house. After working there for a few weeks, she kind of notices some things are a little bit strange. The wife starts acting really strange, doing certain things, saying that Millie hasn't done certain things, or she's lying, or that sort of thing. It's all very weird, and then we kind of follow along with Millie trying to discover what the hell's going on. If you've read a Freida McFadden book before, you just know that there's plot twists galore. Then the next book was A Novel Love Story by Ashley Poston. Literally love the magical realism in her books. They're just so adorable and such cozy reads. So our main character is taking an annual trip for her book club, and she gets caught in a rainstorm, so she pulls over on the side of the road, ends up in this small town. She then discovers the next day that this small town is from her favourite book series, so she ends up literally in a book, which for book girlies, it was such an interesting read. Like, I would love to be stuck in one of my favourite books. Like, put me in Reckless, put me in Magnolia Parks, put me in Powerless. I'd be like, oh my god, I can't believe I'm meeting these people. So it was such an interesting concept. So she gets to like meet all the characters and stuff, and there's a little bit of a romance going on, and there's a little bit of a mystery element to it as well, which I really liked, kind of figuring out stuff with her. But such a cozy read, and just Ashley Poston can do no wrong in my eyes. Just the magical realism is incredible in all of her stories. Then we have The Fake Out, which is a fake dating hockey romance. So we follow Hazel, who's a physiotherapist for a hockey team. She has swore off dating hockey players after her ex-boyfriend kind of broke her heart sort of thing, until he ends up playing on the team that she is a physiotherapist for. She then decides to agree to fake dating Rory, who's another player on the team, and we have basically a fake dating romance. It is so adorable. Rory is literally golden retriever boyfriend through and through. And the next book is Summer Romance by Annabelle Monaghan. We're following Ali, who's going through some life stuff. So her mum passed away and then her husband left, so she's really just going through it at the moment. She has been feeling a bit down and just not herself. One day she decides to try and like cheer herself up. She puts on some proper clothes, takes the dog to the dog park, and ends up meeting someone in a really awkward but funny meet cute. Story then is kind of more of Ali like working on herself, finding who she is in her new life circumstances, but she obviously has a romance with Ethan, who really helps her through these life choices. And again, it's kind of like funny as who he is, who he turns out to be in the story. There's like a little bit of a, not necessarily a mystery, but a bit of like a plot that I didn't see coming. Then the next book is Yours Truly by Abby Jimenez. So we have Brianna and Jacob, who are both doctors at the same hospital. After some not great first impressions, they strike up a sort of communication between letters to each other. So they're leaving letters around the hospital for each other. The two then form a friendship and make an agreement to fake date, because they both have kind of life situations that they're struggling with. So they're fake dating to help Jacob in his life situation, and in return he's helping Brianna with something else as well. The relationship between the characters is so sweet, and the author did such a good job of representing Jacob's anxiety. Honestly, the anxiety representation in this book is spot on. As an anxiety girl in myself, reading in Jacob's point of view was just so, it was so real. It was very realistic, so I really enjoyed that part of it. I just felt seen as myself, and yeah, it was just, the anxiety representation was amazing. Then the next book we have is Beartown, which is a literary fiction following a small town called Beartown, which is literally in the middle of a massive forest. The town are highly focused around their high school hockey team, kind of relying on them to put Beartown back on the map, so the hockey team are under a lot of pressure to succeed. A tragic incident then happens between two of the characters in the story, and then throughout the rest of the story you're following along in many different perspectives throughout the town of how people are dealing with this incident, or how they feel towards it, or their thoughts on the situation. You just learn a lot about the characters. It's a really interesting read, especially with how people have reacted to this certain situation. You just can't believe some people, but also it's what happens in the world. Then the next book we have is Binding 13, which is the first book in the Boys of Tommen series. So this one and the next one both follow in Johnny and Shannon's point of view. Johnny is the captain of the college rugby team and he is solely focused on making it to play for the Irish rugby team. Shannon has just started Tommen College after having some trouble at her old school, and on her first day at Tommen College she bumps into Johnny in a bit of an unusual circumstance, and then from there he kind of like takes her under his wing. He sees in her that she's not had the best upbringing and that she's kind of vulnerable, so he wants to be there to protect her, and then obviously a friendship and a romance sparks from there. But it does focus a lot on the characters and their life struggles and what they're going through in their own heads and why they've chose certain things. Like I say, it does focus a lot on the characters and their home lives, and then obviously the romance is in there as well. But I would check trigger warnings if you're going to read this one, because it does talk about certain things in a bit of detail. The next book we have is If He Had Been With Me, which is a YA. It is a romance, but it is a sad romance, I would say. We follow Finny and Autumn. They have been best friends since they were babies because their mums are best friends and they've always lived across from each other, so they've always been really, really close. Until they then go to high school, where throughout high school Finny and Autumn kind of grow apart a little bit. They're in different friendship groups, they're not really hanging out anymore, but obviously they still live across the road from each other, so they're still interacting, they're just not really as close as they used to be. At the beginning of the story we kind of allude to a tragic accident that happens, and then we're following along with them building up to that event, so you kind of know something's coming and you don't know in detail what's happening, but you kind of get a gist of it. It is extremely sad, although the ending did feel a little bit quick for me, to be honest, but obviously there is a second one, so yeah, it did feel a little bit quick, but it's still very sad. Then we have One Dark Window, which is the first book in the Shepherd King duology. It is a gothic fantasy set in a town where there is a mist that if anyone goes into this mist they get infected. The infected then develop magical abilities, but the magical abilities end up taking a toll on them until they end up deteriorating, until they pass away. The main character Elsbeth, she's infected and she has a nightmare living in her head, which is her kind of magical ability as such. In this town slash world, the magic system is a set of cards, so the cards have again different magical abilities. They're kind of distributed throughout the town, so each one has a different ability. Some are really, really rare, some there's multiple copies of. Different people have different cards. So part of Elsbeth's nightmare living in her head is that she can see the cards when people have them, but to get rid of the infection you have to collect 12 of the cards, so one of each type, reunite them, and then it helps get rid of the infection. So Elsbeth teams up with a highwayman who they kind of have a little bit of a romance as well throughout the story, who collect the cards. It's kind of a heist/fantasy style story where they're working together to collect these playing cards and get rid of this infection. Then we have Yellowface, which is a literary fiction following our main character June. June is an author that hasn't found much success in her career so far, where her friend Athena on the other hand is a best-selling author. One night during catch-up drinks at Athena's apartment, Athena tells June about her new book that she's planning to publish and shows June the manuscript. During this catch-up drinks, Athena dies in a really freak accident, and June ends up stealing Athena's manuscript, taking it home, kind of making a few amends, and then publishing it as her own book. We then follow along with June and the behind the scenes of the publishing industry to see how a book gets from a manuscript to being published into a shop, especially being a bestseller. With June publishing this book that's not her own, there's obviously complications in the story as well. She makes so many bad decisions in this book. You just have to love to hate her and just get on with the book, because honestly she was so frustrating. I'm like, why are you making this decision? It's not a good decision. Why are you justifying it to yourself? Then the next book we have is Coraval, which is the first in a fantasy trilogy. Coraval is an annual game that takes place on a remote island and is run by Legend. Contestants are given a heist/a task to complete in each game of Coraval. This year, sisters Scarlett and Donatella have entered into Coraval, and that's who we're following along with. When Scarlett arrives on the island, she finds out that Donatella has been kidnapped, and that is who everybody needs to find for this game of Coraval. We then follow Scarlett throughout Coraval, with her trying to obviously win so she can find her sister. She doesn't really need to win the game, like she doesn't want to win, but she wants to just find her sister. But people who win get like an extravagant prize as their reward for getting through Coraval. But you follow along with Scarlett, but obviously not everything is as it seems in the game, so it's just really interesting. There's a lot of plot twists, especially to the end when we're finding out what was real, what wasn't real throughout the story. because you're kind of as blind as Scarlet is in this. Then we have Phantasma, which is very, very similar to Coracle, but more of an adult version. Our story follows two sisters, Ophelia and Genevieve, who are necromancers. After the passing of their mother, Ophelia finds out that Genevieve has entered herself into Phantasma, so Ophelia follows her to try and get her sister back. The only way she can do that is by entering into Phantasma herself. Phantasma is the Devil's House, where contestants have to take part in 9 trials to complete the game of Phantasma, but there's a lot of death and nightmares and everything throughout the whole game. Each of the levels kind of reflects the 9 levels of hell, so as you can imagine, it's very nightmare-y, dark fantasy. We follow along with Ophelia trying to find her sister Genevieve, and the last book is If the Crown Fits, which is the first book in a romantasy trilogy. We follow Lara. She is a bandit, and that's kind of what her family does. That's how they kind of make a living. They set out to steal from like rich people and the monarchy, as they kind of have a thing against the royals. Lara is tasked to steal a necklace from the royal family, but when she gets caught, she is propositioned that she needs to pretend to be the princess to fake date a prince from a rival kingdom. So Prince Kai is the king from the rival kingdom, so we then follow along with Lara and Kai and their fake dating situation. She is basically tasked that she needs to steal a family heirloom from him, so we're following along with them. So many things happen throughout this story, so I don't want to say too much more other than that, because there's so many plot twists and stuff going on, but I can't wait to continue the series. So I think the rest of the series is being published next year. I feel like this book has been out for a while, but I think it's been republished recently. But those are all the books that were on my list for 24 books that I loved in 2024. Let me know whether you've read any of them and how you felt about them, and I'm very excited for 2025 reading and to carry on with a lot of this series that we've started this year. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you tomorrow for another day of Bookmas.